So this, I think, is probably the final video looking at that OCR question 1A and 1B on the first paper. I was debating whether to do this today because I noticed this morning I've in fact got a little bit of baby sick on my shoulder. I thought, do I leave it? But I thought, no, I've got one left. Let's get everybody totally confident on this first question. And remember, if you don't do OCR, actually, a lot of the skills here, a lot of the terminology will carry over across multiple exam boards. Really, this is just about finding patterns of evidence and commenting on how it links to context. This should work across lots of different types of question. So we've looked at different ways of approaching 1A and 1B. I've gone through the contextual approach, where you start with what the text is trying to achieve or what the audience is led to think. And now we want to look at the technical approach. So how do you answer 1A and 1B if you are starting with the actual features that you notice? So this 1B, if you want to look at the technical approach. Okay, so remember 1B is sentence structure. That's what it asks about. Okay. Clauses, phrases, syntax is fine, active and passive voice is fine, modals are fine for it, sentence types and functions are absolutely fine for it, infinitives, gerunds, participles are all fine for 1B. So technical approach, what I mean is you look at the patterns of language use first. You look at features that you notice are in the text multiple times and you start with that because that's your pattern, and then you look at why they might be in there. As I've said before, you can use this, you can use the contextual approach, you can actually use a mixture. It might be that for one paragraph you go technical, one you go contextual. That's absolutely fine. Just practice both to see what works. The key thing is to have a range of terminology, a range of evidence, link it together and link it to context. If you do that, that's more important than how you actually set it out. So I'm sure you're sick to death of this text by now, but I wanted to use the same one to show you how you could approach it in multiple different ways, okay? The text is there, okay, and before I show you the three features that I thought were worth talking about for grammar, I've also just put those at the bottom. I think people find 1B a little bit trickier, okay, so I'm going to look at three features for 1B you could look at, and I've tried to rank them so that some are maybe a little bit harder and more what you'd maybe go for if you're going for an A or an A star, and others are maybe more straightforward to actually find, and a mixture in an answer is a great idea, okay? But before I show them, please note there are other things, okay? I've not looked here at sentence types and functions. You absolutely could. There's interrogatives, there's lots of declaratives, there's some imperatives. You could look at that. You could look at the sentence types, the very short sentences, the simple sentences, combined with some of the complex ones. You could look at the aspect of verbs. I've not touched that in this answer, so whether they're progressive aspect and end in ing, or whether they're progressive, so start with had or have usually. And I've not really looked at active or passive voice, so they are absolutely fine to talk about as well. Okay, the things I have chosen to look at are adverbial clauses. Okay, so the clauses that work like adverbs to describe where, when, or how something happened. They describe a verb, and some that I found here were "cause I was." It's used on its own in a sentence, but that's an adverbial clause. It goes with "please tell me you were." While goading proxy punchbag Stanley Johnson works like an adverb of time. Yeah, she was agreeing while goading. There's when it became clear the working class had refused to sit in Channel 4's pre-prepared victim box. So there's that adverbial clause there that shows how actually the voters didn't do what Channel 4 wanted. And there's the Conservative result when it actually came, I talked about. So 4 different adverbial clauses I think you can pick apart and talk about. I also wanted to look at infinitives. Remember, if it's to followed by a verb, it's an infinitive. If you're not great at identifying how they're functioning, even just talking about infinitives that you notice and why they might be in there is a really good starting point. Okay, so I've just underlined those. To ask would be an infinitive. To glory would be an infinitive. To send, there's to sit as well, which I forgot to put the animation on. The working class has refused to sit. And there's to go as well. Next thing, to go. Okay, so all of those are infinitives. They're easy to find, a little bit harder to talk about, but hopefully I'll show you how you could do that. And there's noun phrases as well. There's a lot of noun phrases. These are relatively straightforward, I think, to find. Just a group of words based around a noun. So there's the Nish Kumar moment. There's my general election night. There's a similarly skewed political agenda. There's Channel 4's chaotic alternative election. There's the deeply condescending Catherine Ryan. There's proxy punchbag Stanley Johnson. There's their little Channel 4 London bubble. Okay, quite a long name phrase. There's Channel 4's pre-prepared victim box. There's the boorish, crude and heckling studio audience. Okay, so multiple name phrases in there. And as with the others, I'll go through one in detail and show you what a paragraph might look like. I'll plan one but without writing it, so you can have a go at writing that. And then the last one, the name phrases, I've underlined them there, but you can have a go at sort of planning and writing a paragraph based on that. Okay, so you want to start with the technical patterns. You want to then show the evidence and the terminology you could use to back that up. Then you want to think about what's going on with context. Okay, the bottom one I've left blank so you can do yourself. So 3 things I've noticed. Well, there's adverbial clauses, and what they seem to do when I looked at them, they seem to contrast what Channel 4 expected and what actually happened. That seems to be what they're doing. Now, luckily, there's only 4 of them, and they all knitted together quite well to all do that. But sometimes you might find that actually there's not a single purpose for 10 different adjectives in a text or 10 different relative clauses. What I'd say is just try and connect 2 or 3 of them together. If you notice that 2 or 3 are doing the same thing, put them together and talk about why. When I looked at the infinitives, I think they show what Ross believes is the hypocrisy of the left, and I'll go through that in a second. The name phrases, when I had a look, I think a lot of them seem to suggest that Ross and the reader can see through the nastiness of Channel 4. I think that's where I might go if I was writing a paragraph on that. So there's 4 adverbial clauses I wanted to talk about. There's 'cause I was, which is interesting anyway because it's putting a sentence on its own, so it's non-standard grammar, so it's Ross building up familiarity, but it's also showing his humour at the situation, and it feels like it's a really significant moment, the Nish Kumar moment. Were you there? 'Cause I was. It builds up the moment where basically Nish Kumar lost it. He talks about wall goading Stanley Johnson. He describes Catherine Ryan, and it suggests that basically that was her real job. She was on to supposedly provide comedy, but really she was there to be goading Stanley Johnson. So this idea of Channel 4's intention. He talks about Channel 4 didn't know what to do when it became clear that the working class wouldn't sit in the victim box. So it shows the actual reality of what happened, and that comes quite late in the article. So Ross is really building up this sense of magnitude of that moment. They expected X, but they got Y, and it builds that pride in the reader. And then he also later on then says, they did this sketch about Workington Man, so about the kind of voter who would live in Workington, and actually the Conservatives ended up winning that seat. And so what Ross sort of makes a joke about there is actually they were so wrapped up in the comedy that they missed the fact that actually the Conservatives won that seat. So he contrasts reality and kind of their expectations. So for context, I'd maybe talk about it shows Channel 4 have a clear intention. He suggests they've almost been disrespectful to the audience. They've put them in this box, and we're encouraged to sort of see that as so wrong that we're kind of happy that they're humiliated. We're happy to join Ali Ross in enjoying that, what he calls the Nish Kumar moment. The second one, I've not written this one, but I've sort of planned it. So the infinitives, well, I started to think about how are these infinitives functioning, okay? So what are the infinitives doing in the sentence? And actually, if you're not dead confident with that, you don't have to sort of label all of them, and some of them are very tricky and could be classified in different ways, but just talking about the infinitives and what they might be achieving is a really good starting point, okay? But I think some of the infinitives I felt function basically as adjectives. So he describes himself, Ali Ross describes himself as having to ask. Okay, I've got to ask. So it shows his excitement. He says Channel 4 are stupid enough to glory in their left-wing bias. So that's an adjective. It works like an adjective really to say that they're idiots. They're so stupid that they glory. He talks about the next thing to go. So that describes the thing that goes. So that is another infinitive that works like an adjective, showing that Channel 4 basically have thrown a tantrum. He says the next thing to go was civility. They stopped being polite because they lost their way. It shows they're having a bit of a tantrum. You've also got infinitives that function more like adverbs. They describe what people are doing. So the working class refuse to sit. Okay, so it's describing there. It's working like an adjective because they refuse very proudly. What do they refuse to sit down? Show their pride. Shami Chakrabarti looks like she's been ordered to send her son. Okay, to a comprehensive. So the idea that she's so out of touch that she hates the idea of her son working. Being educated with the working classes. Now, if you can label them in that way, that can be helpful, but even if you can't, what we can start to build up here in a pattern is the idea that the left are presented as really cruel and hypocritical and don't really care and go mad when they lose, whereas the working class are kind of virtuous and proud and they've done what Ross wanted and they should be proud of themselves according to Ross. That's where that paragraph might go. The third paragraph on noun phrases, if you want to do yourself, you can. You might want to look at how he uses it to present Channel 4 as particularly nasty. So what might a paragraph look like? Well, it would look something like this on adverbial clauses. So the adverbial clauses function in the text to show a contrast between what Channel 4 expected and what actually happened. So we've got a really clear topic sentence going, here's the feature, here's what it does, which is emphasised by "'cause I was," where the adverbial clause is put on its own as a non-standard sentence to show Ross's implied familiarity with the readers and also the scale of Channel 4's embarrassment. So that's what it seems to be doing. Another adverbial clause, while goading ... Stanley Johnson. If the quotation's very long, you're okay to do that. Put the 3 dots in the middle. Shows this was Ryan's real purpose and suggests Channel 4 had no interest in facts, meaning mocking those who disagreed. Ross structures the text to show this before later building up to the moment when it became clear that the working class wouldn't sit in Channel 4's victim box. Notice for sentence structure, you can also do that. You can talk about the overall structure. Yeah, why does he leave this moment where the election result came in a little bit later? Well, it's to build up the shock and the contrast, I think. As this adverbial clause shows Ross's pride in the voters for humiliating Channel 4, presenting it as something they should be proud of, even though Channel 4 ignore the facts such as the Conservative winning Workington when it actually came, with the actually emphasising the effect of this adverbial clause in contrasting Channel 4's opinion with reality. They expected one thing, but actually when it came the result was very different. Okay, so that's where you might go with that. So hopefully across these videos you're A, little bit more confident with terminology, and B, feel a little bit happier with question 1 if you're doing OCR on the first paper and knowing what goes in 1A and 1B and how you might structure it. But actually if you're doing a different question on OCR or a different exam board even, hopefully you're a little bit more confident with knitting together features for AO1 and linking those to context for AO3.